The goal of this recording is to demonstrate how a platform trigger of type REST API works. This is requested by someone. So that person, they know how platform triggers work and they know how XML APIs work. So my name is William Leung. I'm the Sage Intacct trainer for the APAC region. This is the date. I'm using the 25R4 version, and I'm using Australian English. And the reason why I mention that is because some terminologies may be different. So just to start off with, I just want to show that there is online help. Let me go here. So there's online help for platform triggers. So this pretty much leads you through the process of creating that platform REST API trigger. So the issue is that there's no examples provided. So that's my goal today, is to provide an example. So this help file, it's quite helpful, and you can follow along to create that trigger. The only thing that I think is maybe a bit wrong is that this step D, it says, instead of going into the details, I'll explain that a little bit later. So let me just dive into the application and do that demo. So before I do that, I just want to go to the slides just to make sure, to show this last slide. So on this last slide, what I'm aiming to do is set the payment term of a vendor if it's left blank. And I just want to just say that for this use case, I wouldn't use this type of trigger to perform this particular use case, but it's something to show how the API platform trigger works. And since my demo company, I'm using Australian English, you'll see the word supplier instead of vendor, just for those people that are not from my region. Okay, so let me go into the application, and I've just logged in twice, so I can do create the trigger on one screen and then look at the result on another screen. Okay. The other thing I'd like to say is that when I'm doing work like this, I always use like Postman, and it's also possible to get this sort of information by looking at the online help. But the advantage of Postman is it has the online help as well, but I can also see values. So there are some values you can't see through this UI. And for example, this is just a list of the payment terms. And you can see this key, that's an internal key that we can't see through the API. I mean, through the UI. Okay, so let me go back to the Intacct. So with Intacct, this is the list of suppliers, and just going to another screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the supplier list again, or the vendor list. And there's several ways of accessing the object definition. This is just one simple way. So I'm just going in and going to access the object definition. So this is the object definition. The request was to specifically talk about platform triggers. So I won't go into all the details, but I'm just going to click on this trigger. So there's no triggers for suppliers at the moment or vendors. So I'm just going to click on the trigger, and then I'm going to create a new trigger. So this is where I'll just like to refer back to the help just to show that, it is quite useful. So if I look at the help, it says the first thing we need is to select the trigger type, and that is REST API. So if I go back here, sorry, wrong one. And you can see there's different trigger types. So I'm going to select the Intacct REST API. Then I'm going to click next. So the next thing that you need to do is, well, we have to deploy this trigger or it's not going to work. But you have to think, okay, I'm on the vendor, and when do I want this trigger to be activated? So in my use case, what I'm going to do is, if I update or create a vendor and then I save that vendor, then the system is going to check to see if the payment terms is there or not. And if it's not, then I'm going to fire off a trigger, an API call to update that payment term. So I'm going to select after creation or after an update. So we have to set a name for this trigger. So we can say default, shouldn't think too long about this, default term. And then we have this, I'll just go back to the help to see if it talks about it. So it doesn't even talk about that, but I think it's quite intuitive, is when do you want this to be activated? So I want this trigger to be activated when on any update on any field. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it on any update. Then if I go back to the help, it says choose the API version. Currently, we are only on version 1. So, and sometimes if it's, I won't talk about the beta, but let's not distract things. So we're currently on version 1. So I've set version 1. And this application ID is optional. And I'm not going to fill anything here because I'm just going to update the same application that we're in. So that's why it's optional. And what I want to do is indicate what record I'm updating. So I'm on the supply record, and say there's another scenario where I've got, I need to say I want to I've got a customer record as well that is, there is a business partner that is both a customer and a vendor, and I just want to create a customer record at the same time, so I can actually come here and say and trigger the customer record. But in this case, I'm just going to update the vendor record, myself. Okay, so when I say update, what I mean is I want to make a REST API call against this resource. And the only types that are available to me is the ones that are listed here. So here I'm going to say patch, which means I'm going to update that vendor record. So if I go back to the instructions, this is we're up to. We're up to step C. I'm choosing to update that record. And when you update a record, uh, we need to know which specific record we're updating. So I think this here is a mistake, because the target ID tells you what record you are going to make the REST API call against. So that's going to apply to delete as well. However, yeah, so what I think this refers to is step E. With step E, you need a document template, because if you're familiar with REST API calls, when you create a post or a patch call, you do need to supply a payload, okay? And that payload is going to be stored in the document template. So if you're using a patch or post, you'll have to create a document template. However, if you're just deleting, then you just need the target, the record, which is represented by this target resource ID. So in my mind, the target resource ID is required, and the document template is only required for patch or post. Okay, so I'm going to switch back here, and with this target ID, one thing I can do is I can go down here. This is for creating the trigger condition formula, which we'll do later. But I'm using this to just get a sense of the the syntax involved. So I'm going to access the vendor ID. Well, I'm just getting the syntax. So I'm actually not getting the vendor ID, but I'm just getting this so I can get the syntax here. Because that's going to provide me with the vendor ID. But this is where I use Postman. So in Postman, just finding my mouse. See my mouse. Sorry. So I'm just going to go to, this is one of the vendor record. Oh, this is another one. It's got more information here. So I can see here that this is key. So with the REST API, this is what we're talking about. This is what tells the system which actual record we're updating. So I can see that I need this key. So I'm just going to go back now to here, and I know that that's called key. So what I'm doing is, okay, I'm updating this a specific vendor record, and with this vendor record that's in the in context, there's certain fields. So this field, or this specific key, represents the that key that I need to identify that record I'm updating. So incidentally, I can just hard code this. So I can hard code it with, if I go back to, to Postman, I can see 13. So yeah, I can just simply just click, type 13 here, but that means I'm going to be hard coding. So every time I do something, I'm just going to specifically update that vendor record. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is, since I'm, doing patch, I do need to give some sort of payload. So this is analogous of when uh, if I'm going in Postman and say I go to vendors, if I want to patch that vendor, I'm going to need to supply this body. So this is what I'm doing with that document template. So if I go back here and I create a new document template, and we just have to give it some sort of name, and I'm going to say up. I'm just going to call it default terms again. I don't have to make the same name, and just going to select the version here, and notice that we've got these merge fields that are going to help me determine the field. So I can select here. I'm selecting, terms. And basically here, I'm selecting this just to understand that, the level that the term will sit under. So this is why I prefer to use Postman. If I go to Postman and I go back to that record for that vendor, I can see if I scroll down here, because I'm looking at this level. So this is the first level. There's the ID here, and I'm just keeping my cursor there so I can keep track. Often if I'm doing something, it's easier for me to just cut and paste this to Notepad++. But yeah, for this simple thing, I don't need to do that. So I'm just scrolling down here until I see the, now instead of using that, because I already know from what I showed you before that it's on a second level. I'm going to scroll past it. Terms. I'm going crazy. There it is. So I can see here, this is the syntax that is required in the document template. So let me go back to Intacct, and I'm going to now enter that into the system. So it is a term. So I'm, with something simple like that, you probably don't need to go to Postman, but I can see here that it's term, and then the key and the ID is on a second level. So we do have to use the internal key. So I'm gonna that's on no the second level here. Don't forget to put the double quotes. And I'm going to put the key. So just let me go to Postman and double check to see. So I'm using this key. Let me make it this one, this payment term. I'm due on receipt, so 6. So let me go back to here and make that 6. Okay, I'm just checking the if I've got all the double quotes there, and that looks good. So save that, and I can now actually test this. I don't have a condition in. That means for every vendor that I update, or create, it's regardless of whether it's got payment terms, it's going to update that payment term. So if I go into this test vendor, and this test vendor is it was actually created from Postman. So I'm just going to go in here and just have a look at I think it should be under payment information. There's no payment terms here. So I'm just going to go into this supplier. I'm just going to edit this. And okay, so that was done. And if I go back in to that, and we go to the payment information, and it wasn't updated. Right. So that means I can show you some debugging to see. Okay, that's because I haven't saved it. So now I've saved it, and you can see there's one trigger there. So let's do that testing again. So I'm just going to click on edit, change the name again. Was unsuccessful. Okay. Let's go here, and let me edit this. Term. Oh yeah, I see. I've got a next. See my problem. Sorry, edit. Okay, that's at the same level. That should be better. Save that. So that's saved, and close this. Click on save, and let's try again. So I've still edited this. So I click on the save again. And this time, no error. So that looks good. So I'm just going to go into view mode. And you can see here, the payment term has been updated. So the platform trigger is working, and I've basically fulfilled the request. But let me go in and do that last point, like add a trigger condition. So if I go back to the application here and go to triggers, so I'm going to edit that trigger again. So basically, any vendor I update or create, it's just going to update the payment term to the one that we've hard coded there. So what I want to do is add a condition and only update it when that that payment term is empty. So the way I do that is, first I'm just gonna see get that payment term. So the payment term's there, and copy that. And the way what I do is I need to test if this Intacct is returning the data, because right now there is a limitation for platform triggers in that associated records, we can't update or access associated records. Yeah, so you can with XML, but but theoretically the payment term key should not be an associated record. So we've got this syntax validation. If I click on that, it tells me that this is valid JavaScript. But what I usually do is I use this debug to test the formula. So this is not a proper conditional formula. At this stage, I'm just testing if it's returning any value. So I'm going to click on the debug. And when you click on debug, what the debug does is it brings up this window, and you can choose any vendor to run this JavaScript against. So I'm going to just check the post company. And I can see here that there is some problem. It's not, this is the formula. And when it's parsed, there's nothing returned here. So let me try key. And I do the debug again. And again, there's nothing being returned here. Okay, so when I notice this, I've actually put a question in the development forum, but there's no answer on this yet. And you're unlikely to get help through support. It's more of a consulting question. But just to show you what I mean, I'm going to do just something that is going to return something definitely like some silly condition, which is the name, the supplier name. So I'm just going to copy this and put it here. Okay, so I'm going to click on the debug just to show you what I mean. I'm going to run that JavaScript. Okay, I need semicolon here. What is wrong? Let me put a bit more code, because I think when you parse it, I was hoping that it's going to parse the name, but let me put a bit more logic in here. If the name, if the name I know what I've left out. Sorry. I'm not a full-time developer. I just have a technical understanding. So um, that's why I forget these little details. I do need to put quotes around this. And um, let's try the debug again. So you can see here, it is parsing. So this is what I wanted to test. So it is parsing the original formula properly. So let me just terms, just to make sure that this is, if this is going to make it work. Where is that window? The debug window. Sorry, I'm looking for the debug window. Sometimes the debug window comes up and it's nowhere to be found. It's I shouldn't say nowhere to be found, but it's hidden by some other window. I can't see it. So let me try that again. Okay. So it doesn't like the ID. So it's returning terms. So um, you can see that works. So I'm going to close that and put some more conditions here. So I can say something like if so this is condition. So if the payment term is equal to test, it's going to return true, and then the trigger is going to be run. So, um, so if it doesn't, if it that doesn't, um, if that's not true, or if that doesn't evaluate to true, then I'm going to return false. Okay, so I'm going to use the debug. Actually, before I do the debug, let me just go here to see what that supply is actually called test one. So let me let me check the capitals and all that. It's test one, lowercase. Okay, so I'm going to do the debug again. So if I debug against the post, you can see here that the parsing works and the result is false. So that means the trigger is not going to be run. But if I close this and I debug again, and this time I choose that test vendor, you can see here now it's returning true and it's going to update the vendor. Okay, so I think I've completed the job and I'm going to save this, and all that's left to do is to test. So I'm going here. Uh, let's yeah, I should have changed the to another payment term, but um, let's go to done. Let me get rid of this condition so I can see all the vendors. And I'm going to edit this vendor. There's a payment term of net 30 there. And what I'm going to do is, since the trigger is on any field, update to any field, just going to update the name. This is another trigger that I've got on, and this is something else I've put on there. So don't worry about that. It wasn't a platform trigger, it was something else, but yeah, some other customization I was doing before. And if I go back into this vendor, you see it's still net 30. So, yeah, now we go back to this vendor. And I'm going to edit this. So it's got, the trigger is going to trigger only if the name of the supplier is test one. So here, I'm just going to change it to net 30 and save. So there's two things happening. I'm saving the record. It's going to be net 30. Then I'm going to trigger a REST API call to update the payment term. So if I look at this, and you can see it has been updated. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you in this recording. So I'm hoping that it has been of a benefit. Yeah, if there's anything, so I'm going to stop the recording and